piece, this is actually an essay I wrote. I was born and raised here in the Rogue Valley, and I lived in Southern California for 21 years. And about a year ago, I moved back to be near my family, one of whom is here tonight. My father is here to support me, which is awesome. And so this is an essay I wrote about what it's like to come back to your childhood home. And I hope that you find some of it funny in there too. Okay. As I stroll the streets of my Southern Oregon childhood after a 21-year absence, I am struck by how much changes, but how even more stays the same. During my time in Southern California, I ventured home to see my family once a year during the summer and always for Christmas, but visits and relocating are far from the same. Having left in my 20s and returning in my 40s, I am a vastly different person than when I left. Although I created a life for myself in California, the Rogue Valley has always been home. Perhaps it's because it was where I was born and raised, or perhaps it's because my family still lives here. When I first moved to Southern California, so many familiar things were far away, like the local privately owned grocery store that I grew up going to, familiar back roads that I used as an antidepressant in high school, childhood friends, childhood memories, the park where I loved to swing, and my family, AKA my emotional safety net. I had to make the move away, just like I had to make the move back. I was conflicted both times, but in both cases, the needle weighed heavily in the direction of relocation. Sometimes, since my move, I find myself disoriented as to where I am and which friends belong to which place. When in a conversation the other day with a stranger, after hearing that his son went to the U of O, I almost exclaimed, "I'm from Oregon," forgetting momentarily that I was currently having this conversation in Oregon. Thank goodness I caught myself before my outburst made me sound like a lunatic. When I lived down south, I stood out for having come from the country, like when none of my friends knew what a dually was, or when I shared that in grade school we watched educational movies on fishing and railroad safety. On my visits home, my big city life would always betray me as no longer being an Oregonian, giving myself away when asking, were they going to have adequate parking, or proclaiming that I saw John Stamos at the airport again. I felt pride when a stranger, upon finding out that I was from Oregon, said, "Oh, that's why you're so friendly." I used to feel a mixture of pride and embarrassment every time I had to tell an old friend that I'd moved to Los Angeles, that I lived there by choice. Part of me felt like a badass for living in the big city. Another part was worried that the shallowness of the area was rubbing off on me. At my 10-year high school reunion, people asked me if I was scared to live in LA. All I could think was that I wouldn't stay living there if I was. No one was holding me hostage. I was there by choice every day that it was a choice that I made every day that I woke up, still in LA. And it's not like I lived in South Central. I was living in decent parts of LA, although there were times that I nearly ran out of gas. There was the time I nearly ran out of gas on Normandy. That was scary. But now, back in my native land of hippies and rednecks, I cruise the back roads like the child of the Rogue Valley that I am, driving way too fast like it's my birthright, and ceasing to wash my car because rain or snow are perpetually around the corner. Although I'm continually surprised when it happens. And my cats are totally confused and often cold. On the weekends, I like to go and swing at my old grade school, and as I do, I wonder if I'll ever grow up. I assure those that I tell that I moved here from Pasadena, California, that I am from here, born here, returning home, for there is no greater sin to a Southern Oregonian than to be a California transplant. The Oregon motto known by the natives is, "Welcome to Oregon, now go home." I'm not entirely sure why. We are a friendly people, to be sure. Many years ago, my sister jokingly called me a traitor when I came back to visit with a California license plate on my car, which is kind of the opposite stance, but somehow definitely the same. My LA wardrobe doesn't fit my homecoming these days. I am often accused of being overdressed. It never bothers me. I've always been a little on the fancy side clothing-wise, although the lack of sleeves on most of my favorite frocks do have me longing for June. Everything is so close together, yet certain things like IKEA, the Troubadour, Whole Foods, Disneyland, the beach, and the desert are much, much farther away. I also never see John Stamos at the airport anymore. Driving is less stressful as the sheer number of people around me has greatly diminished, but more stressful in the way that small-town drivers are not used to traffic. So if there is any, they lose their minds. They become impatient, territorial, making irrational choices to make sure that you know it was their turn to go next. I'm struck by the lack of diversity. Most of the people who live here are white. There are a few foreigners, Black or Asian people, or men without facial hair. But that was just how I left it. I am constantly reminded in other ways that I'm home again, bumping elbows with the friendly, the rebels, the perpetually stoned, the eccentrics, the good old boys, The small town big fish, the hunters, the earth mamas and papas, the mushroom goddesses, the artists, the retirees, but most importantly, and the reason for my return, my family.